hours after 64, 68 people lost their lives, their loved ones. They still haven't been even rescued from the Potomac River. And Donald Trump is blaming DEI. Now, here's the real issue. There were problems with the FAA when this crash occurred. In fact, and this is according to the New York Times, the control tower staffing that oversaw the Ronald Reagan Airport airspace was, quote, not normal during the deadly crash. That's from the FAA's internal report. In fact, the controller on duty the night of the accident last night was doing a job usually handled by 2 people. So you're doing the job of 2 people as an air traffic controller, which is insane. Now, why would that be? It's important to know that Trump, even in the week that he has been president, has everything to do with this. Number one, Waj, do you know there is no current head of the FAA? That's
Sadly,
right.
I do know this, and this is what fuels my nightmares.
So there is no head of the FAA right now. His name was or is Michael Whitaker. He resigned in advent of Donald Trump's ascension back to the throne because he and Elon Musk were getting into spats over many years over, of course, Elon's stupid rockets. So that's why he resigned. Now that role
and the rocket, which, by the way, I always have to remind people, exploded last week.
Right. So that's the FAA. But since in office, Trump himself put a hiring freeze on air traffic controllers. So even if they needed to staff up, they couldn't have staffed up. No, we don't know exactly if one of it was in relation to this, but there's other clues. Trump also fired the entire Aviation Security Advisory Committee, people. This is in a week. And there's also no current head of TSA. So transportation security, gone. There's also a number of vacant positions right now at the FAA. Again, deputy administrator, associate administrator, airports, chief counsel, on and on and on and on. This is what happens when you want to demolish the administrative state. Aircraft safety goes completely out the window. And yet he has the gall to say it is DEI. And this was CNN's aviation expert just reacting to Trump's, honestly, and he calls it unhinged press conference.
This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged.
His words, he said unhinged, and that's the name of our show, America Unhinged. That is an aviation expert. It's not just me and Francesca, folks. And speaking about the unhinged manner with which Trump has responded today, he had a moment yesterday when, like I said at the beginning of the show, when you hear something like this, when I read about it, you sit there and you just go, my God. And it's so close to home, folks. It's right down the street. These people worked at my kid's school. 14 figure skaters, the future of U.S. figure skating, they said was on this plane, right? The 3 passengers on that Black Hawk helicopter, right? So many lives. And this is how Donald Trump last night, I don't know if you saw his post on Truth Social. Check it out on the right-hand side. Folks, his initial response
was on a perfect and routine line of approach to the airport. The helicopter was going straight at the airplane for an extended period of time. It's a clear night. The lights on the plane were blazing. Why didn't the helicopter go up or down or turn? Why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do? Maybe because you froze all air traffic controller hirings.
But look at the end. Look at the end. All caps. Can you read that?
Not good.
Yeah, not good, folks. Not good situation. And in the press conference today, where he blamed DEI, Donald Trump said, and I want to quote him, he will restore our faith in America's air travel by ensuring that air traffic controllers, the ones that can't get to work because he freezed hiring, are, quote, naturally talented geniuses. And he was flanked by Francesca, our new head of transportation, not Pete Buttigieg, but Sean Duffy. And if you're an old head like me, you recall Sean Duffy because he was in the cast of The Real World, where he married, and then later he married another Real World cast member, Rachel Campos. And I think they have like 14 kids now, or maybe 15.
Right.
Oh, can we get a fact check? They got a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
But he's the new transportation guy. And the other person who was there was, wait for it, a natural genius, Pete Hegseth, our new Secretary of Defense. Yet that same Pete Hegseth, who was a Fox host for about 10 years and whose own mother called him a sexual abuser and who has paid a woman about $50,000. She signed an NDA. She can't speak out about the alleged sexual abuse. He is an officer 4 rank. And just so you know, that the last Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, a black man, had to be a 4-star general.
Yes.
Just so Pete Hegseth could be an alcoholic, allegedly, and abuse women, allegedly, and become the Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth then took the mic and said the following, quote, "The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need," he said this shit with a straight face, folks, quote, "we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control or whether it's in our generals or whether it's throughout government," end quote.
You need people, period. And you can't do that when you put a hiring freeze on the FAA. And, oh, by the way, you sent a mass email that basically cribbed off of Elon Musk's work when he fired all the Twitter employees that said, hey, guys, if you're a federal employee, you should probably resign right now. Indiscriminate, doesn't matter where you work, doesn't matter if you're in aviation safety. Why don't you just take a load off for the next 8 months? You'll get paid. And, we'll put the best and brightest little hamster that just sort of, like they know when a crash is going to happen. Hamsters are very astute at knowing when a crash is going to happen and when the helicopter should go up or down or swerve. It is beyond, it's beyond comprehension, Waj, like how disgraceful this response is.
That's right.
How disgusting it is, how terrifying it is for not just the people who were on that plane, but for their loved ones and for all of us who, God, millions of Americans went on planes today. How do we know that our government actually is making sure that we're safe?
I use DCA Airport all the time. All right. That's an airport that I use. It's 15 minutes away from my home. And like I said before, I just found out once my kids came home that apparently it was a 1 degree of separation, right? But next day it could be your family. It could be your staffers who work at your kid's school. It could be your kids, right? God forbid. Yep. And I want to go back to this image that Francesca, you played. This is happening under Donald Trump's presidency. The firings, the freezes. Look at the vacant FAA positions. Look at the first one on the top left column. What does that say, Francesca?
Oh, chief? But that was...
Chief of the FAA, folks. Who needs a chief of the FAA? Listen. Okay, let me be generous. Suppose he wants to clean house. Suppose he wants to truly bring in the geniuses to staff the FAA and TSA and Coast Guard. Fine. You know what I would have done? And who am I but a middle-aged man who drives a minivan? I would have these brilliant men and women lined up, and as soon as I fired or pushed out the FAA chief, I would replace him right there and then, because it seems like an important job. If I would fire the TSA head, I would immediately, right as I announce his firing or her firing, bring in another person who'd be, I don't know, qualified or a natural genius. So we would actually have qualified, competent, experienced people in these positions where literally our hands are in their lives, Francesca.
I mean, what's so funny about this is that he can't even pass the buck and fire the FAA head because he already did that. He can't fire the advisory committee because he already did that. In fact, that might have most directly led to what happened. And I think one thing that's important to know is there's always a grain of truth in all of the lies that the right spins about things like this, right? And the grain of truth is not that DEI caused this, but that under Obama, there was an expansion to try to get more diverse hirings in the FAA, right? Expand it, have more job training and the job pool, right? And Donald Trump, the first administration, continued those programs to have more inclusive FAA, a more diverse FAA. It was like, nah. Now, did that mean they lowered the standards to be an air traffic controller? Of course not. No.
And also, Francesca, this is important. I'm glad you mentioned this because they've actually done an analysis and an audit of those DEI hires, and nowhere does it show that increasing the pie, bringing in qualified women and people of color, lowered safety standards. It's all BS. It's all bunk. What I would have wanted was at least someone there. At least give me a human being who is somewhat competent, and we didn't even have that in the Trump administration. And I want to say this before we move on because it's an important point. if God forbid this would have happened under President Biden's watch, and it didn't happen under Obama's watch, it happened under Trump's watch. What would Republicans have done for the next 4 years if this, with all the facts that we just showed, what we know right now, if this would have happened in the first week and a half of President Biden's administration, Francesca, what would the right wing have done?
I mean, Buttigieg would have been gone. Buttigieg would have been just a little, spritz of mist, like, bye, Buttigieg would have been gone. I mean, Biden, this would have been massive. They would not let this go every single day. And honestly, to honor the people who died unnecessarily and for all of our sakes, we should not let this go. And I'm one of the first people who drew the connection because there was already reporting from hours before this accident happened that the lack of FAA was putting us all at risk and staffing was putting us all at risk. There was reporting being done about that because it was one of the first things that he did when he came into office. And so the writing was on the wall. And so miss me with this, like, well, we don't know, we should probably tread lightly. Nah, man.
No.
This is exactly what happens when you try to deregulate literally everything. But of course, lastly, Donald Trump, had a beat. He took a moment from his press conference and he signed another executive order. Was it about like aviation safety and staffing up at the FAA and, making sure that we reduce the number of planes that come through the DC airport because apparently congestion is way up and it's way over capacity? No. Instead, he did this.
Second for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA administrator, in this case, acting FAA administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
If it's infuriating, it should be. If you're angry, you have every right to be. This is something that should really make your blood boil. And I'm a person who's very even-keeled, Francesca. But to see that press conference, I know we're wrapping it up, but to see that press conference, especially as we're getting all the news of the fact that there was one person doing two people's jobs, the fact that this never happens, the fact that we have the most incompetent people in office, the fact that we don't have an FAA chief, a TSA chief, and he comes back and triples down on Festivus and blames women and people of color. I have some swear words, but there's kids around, so I won't say anything.
No, it's enraging. I mean, Biden's woke policies, like, if you are dumb enough to think that woke caused an air collision, the likes of which we haven't seen in 20 years, I don't even know what to tell you anymore, dog. Like, you're gone. You're so unserious. And that's at the highest level here. I mean, it's wild.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.